So I first heard about Dragon's Back Race about 5 years ago. I saw a film about it at Sheffield Adventure Film Festival, and it just stuck in my mind and in my imagination as this race that seemed completely impossible for anyone to complete. And then over the years, I started running longer distances, and actually it just stayed in the back of my mind and thinking, maybe I could do that. And it just seemed like a really big and initially impossible challenge.
The Dragon's Back's got a pretty infamous reputation, so I think it's fair to say I was very, very nervous about attempting it.
Preparing for an event like the Dragon's Back race requires a huge commitment from the participants. It's not just the physical training, that's the time running and walking in the hills, but it's the emotional commitment. It's the time away from family and friends. It's the time spent dreaming about that race and their experience. This requires so much.
The reason I wanted to do the Dragon's Back in 2019 is because that was the year I was turning 60, and it offered a sort of landmark for the year. And it seemed like a way of celebrating a lifetime of fell running.
I completed the Dragon's Back race 2 times. Once in 2017 and once in 2019. Perhaps completing the race in 2017, I was most well known for winning the biggest trophy on offer, which is for the slowest time to complete the course.
I didn't really have any tactics as such. It was more of a survival strategy. I just wanted to finish the race, but to be honest, it seemed impossible that I could reach the end because this was much harder than anything I'd ever done. So I thought, well, I'll just take it day by day and try and make it last as long as possible.
It doesn't matter if you're leading the event, you're in the middle of the pack, or you're struggling to finish. There are no guarantees at this race, and every edition, many people fail to finish.
I was at the Dragon's Back race in 2017. And I got timed out on the first day, and that felt terrible. I was devastated. I knew that I was probably not gonna make the whole week. It was my first international race, first time running in the fells. There were like so many new unknowns for me, and I was in for a really steep learning curve. But being timed out at Penny Pass on day 1 was like terrible. I was not sure I belonged in the race. I was not sure I was capable of doing it. But my tent mates, 7 other wonderful girls I've never ever met, convinced me that, yeah, you can do this. Yeah, you're okay. You can do it. You start tomorrow. So thanks to them, I got a lot of experience in 17, the remaining of the week, which I used when I went back in 2019. One really important thing I did different in 19 compared to 17 was that in my training, I trained ascents. Instead of training kilometers, I simply put a target on weekly ascent meters. So living in Denmark turned out a bit ridiculous, finding the same little loop, just going around and around and around and around. But it did the trick. I got my dragon in 2019.
I came back in 2019, having learned a lot from 2017, and finishing with cutting a huge, at least 5 hours off my finishing time. I think it highlighted to me the importance that perhaps personally, and maybe I'm unique in this perspective, training for such races in a relatively flat environment like Norfolk is considerably more challenging than when you live in somewhere that's quite hilly like the Peak District.
So I decided to sign up about a year before the actual race happened, because that's when the entries opened. And so I had a long time to train, really. I was quite nervous about my chances of being able to complete a 5-day race. I'd never done such a long event before doing the Dragon's Back, and therefore I think I prepared quite well. I probably over-prepared. Most weekends, especially over winter, we camped in the cold and rain and recce'd all of the route in sections. And I think the thing that I most remember about those weekends is how I got to know Wales, how I got to meet the people who lived there, how we ended up in random pubs during the Six Nations cheering for Wales whilst they played against England.
I'd done a lot of walking in Wales before I signed up for the event, and then once I signed up, I had recce'd 4 out of the 5 days. So I had quite a good idea of what each day would entail and how difficult that would be. I think my main worry was how I'd hold up to the cumulative 5 days of long days out, tough terrain, lots of up and down, kind of how my body would hold up to that.
I spent a lot of time doing long runs through January and February in the Black Mountains and the Brecons. And then in the February half term, Pam and I travelled up to Machynlleth, and I visited Cadair Idris, the Tarrans, and all the way down through to Llandovery in some dreadful weather, it must be said.
There are very few runners who are able to race an event like the Dragon's Back race. Most people are there and they're in survival mode, and we would strongly recommend that for all but the top 0.5% of runners coming to the event, that's the strategy they adopt. It's about a careful, considered and measured approach to completing the race.
Every morning I try to get out as close as possible to 6 a.m. Again, just to give myself the best chance of finishing by the 11 p.m. cut-off time.
Good morning!
And I just, before the race, I had big plans of stretching and recovery drinks and even having chips after each stage. But the reality was I didn't see any chips all week because I got in too late every night. And I just had to strip everything down to the essentials. So I'd get in at night, eat, sleep a few hours, and then in the morning get up, eat some snacks for breakfast at the same time as I was packing my bag, and then head straight out the door. And it was just as well that I did that because I didn't really have very much time to spare.
But on day 2, I went out in the wrong shoes for the Rhinox. So I wrecked my feet, totally. I got trans feet, they simply fell apart. The skin loosened under the feet. It's painful. Like, I now know blisters don't hurt. I know what hurts. So when I get to camp on day 2, again, it was my tent mates who saved me. I went down to my tent, took off my shoes. I knew I needed food, but getting on my feet again, going to the tent was like, oh, I can't deal with it. But they convinced me, just shh, be quiet, just go eat. So I went to the mess tent, cried a little bit there, and the medics, they were in the tent and I was like looking at me like, you come with me. And they helped me. You can say many things about medics. Some runners, they say, oh, the medics will pull you out of the race. Yeah, if they do so, it's for a reason. They will do a lot to help you. And they totally saved me.
I don't want to do this. Don't, you'll make me cry. I don't want to go back. Where's do this again?
I found the end of day 4 really hard going. It was actually one of the few times in the race where I ended up on my own for quite a few hours. So mentally that was really challenging. And by the time I got to the end of day 4 campsite, I was feeling pretty dreadful actually. Luckily for me, there was an amazing volunteer who spent over an hour, I think, just with me, making sure I'd eaten enough food and looked after myself and really gave myself the best possible chance of being able to make it around the final day.
Well, for me, the main challenges in the week were logistical. I found the mountains were tough, the mountains were hard, it was hot, it was dry, but I was sort of psychologically ready for that. The challenges were getting enough to eat in the evenings, getting enough to drink, getting enough sleep and resting and being sufficiently fresh the following morning to set off at 7 o'clock for the next day's run.
Everyone was so kind, the atmosphere was really positive, and that made all the difference. That was what made it special. And that was what just motivated me to push on and to want to stay a part of the race for as long as possible, and kept me going.
Day 5 surprised me. It was strange. It was unreal. It was a little bit sad. It was like joy. Yeah, I'm doing this. I'm one of those that can do this. But then suddenly it came as like, oh, but it's over soon. I don't want it to be over. So I actually had a moment on the last checkpoint before the descent down to the finish line, just sitting there for 10 minutes, being ready for it all to be over. And I finished and got my dragon.
Funnily enough, when I look back on it, I don't think of any of the low points at all. I think of the views. I mean, the scenery was just incredible. It was in these endless ridges and mountains, and just seeing Wales unfold before us with every mile.
Still in the back of your mind though, you're thinking 40 miles to go. Can't take anything for granted here. So I just tried to break it down checkpoint by checkpoint and just keep going all day. There were a couple of pretty emotional moments in the day where the people you've got to know really well throughout the week had to drop out, and that's really upsetting because you get to know kind of people, particularly towards the back, really quite well, and you're all in the same boat and you all know how the other people are feeling. So it's really sad to see your friends not make it to the end. It was probably only when I got to the final road section, the last few miles, where I actually thought, all right, I'm gonna make this. So I kind of crossed the finish line, was pretty dazed, pretty exhausted, and got whisked off to the finishing hall, not really knowing too much what was going on. And as soon as I walked in, just got a massive round of applause from all the other finishers. And it was an absolutely incredible moment, kind of going up on stage and getting my dragon from Shane. An amazing feeling.